activities today that are gonna help us understand how the light hits our object and how our object is gonna react to this. How is this important? When you see an animal in nature, maybe you're doing a little hiking and you see a bird flying, or you see a lizard, or any animal that you see, it's very complicated to understand actually the source, the light source that you have, because when we're outside, there's going to be a lot of light surrounding us. Okay, yeah, we have the sun, but maybe we have another light. We have objects that can be reflecting light, so this can affect our object in multiple ways. So when we're starting to do our drawings, it's better to think only in one light source. Mm, it's also been proven that the human brain understands objects better when they're receiving light from the left, right part of the picture. So if you're doing your illustration, you're gonna wanna have your light over here, and that's gonna make you read what you're seeing better. So all the exercises that we're doing and also all the activities that we're doing are gonna be with the light coming from the left and from above. This is also a convention in scientific illustration, and you're going to be able to see. I can show you some examples later on how they use the light from this point, this corner, so the object is going to be more understandable. I'm going to show you, yeah, with the images that we were seeing in the last class of my lizard that I'm drawing. You can see that actually telling where the light is coming from this one is very complicated. If you see the back of the animal, you see a lot of shadow. And if you go ahead, let's look to another one. Maybe this one is having a lot of light, so you cannot really see a cast shadow or any form shadows on the animal. In this one, you also don't see the cast shadow. It looks like the light is coming completely from above, like it's noon and the sun is just sitting on top of the animal. This one, we have a different lighting. We have a lighting coming from the right side of the animal, and something like this is what we want, that we have a clear idea or of where we have our light side and our darker side of the object. Yeah, again, you see this picture and you don't really have a clear understanding of where the light is coming from. So what we want is to make this part very noticeable, the light side and the shadow side. So as I was mentioning, maybe an example like this is something that would work best. But then this is not what we want, because this is having the light on its right side. And what we want is to have the light on the left side, like coming from here. And then the dark part of the animal would be on this side instead of this side. So we're gonna be working with some exercises today. It's quite simple. We're gonna be doing a cube and a sphere to understand how these objects are gonna be impacted by the light. Alright. So yes, we have here the cube and the sphere, and we're gonna think of these objects with a light coming, as I mentioned. It's gonna be coming from the left upper side of the object. So what we want is to think of a light source coming from here, from this object, and from this object maybe from here. So when we're having an object like a square, it's gonna be easier to define the transitions between our light side and our darker side. So in our light side, we're gonna be having this part of the square, and both of these sides are gonna be shadow sides. So this one and this one are shadow. When we're having a light source from here, then you also gonna have cast shadow. The shadow is a shadow from the object that we're drawing that is being um, on another object. So in this case would be the ground that we have here is gonna cast the shadow of this object. So they would be on this part below here. And I just want you to draw your square and do this exercise with me. When we're having an object like that, then almost we're gonna have these parts in a very plain tone. You're gonna see that when we're gonna jump into our sphere, it's gonna be a bit different because then we have to work with the transitions of the tones. And I know you cannot see the light. Okay, I just want you to see this point. I think it's quite important for the activity that we're doing today. And then let's say that we have the floor. Just go in here. In here is a little bit lower. And in here we have it here. Okay. So when we have this light is very predictable in a way that is gonna act on straight lines. Okay, I wanna move it a little bit above. And then I'm gonna connect that point of light, and I'm gonna connect our ground. And then again I'm gonna do it with this end. And I'm gonna do it with this end. So this is gonna be the shadow that is gonna be projecting. Then we also have to use this one, so we can understand the one that is going here. So where this line is touching this line, we're gonna imagine that we can see this line and that we can follow it all the way to here. Same here. And then we can put these two ones together. And these ones as well. So light is gonna be touching the object in a pretty straight way, and that's why it's gonna be easier to draw this type of objects, because a square is just straight line, so then we understand clearly what's happening. And then we're just gonna shade our object to give it the three-dimensionality. In here, of course, we already have set three-dimensionality, but we're just gonna make it clearer. So on top, we're having our light side. So we're just gonna go light with it, because it's the one that's catching the most amount of light. So you can be very soft. Again, we're doing these exercises with our pencils because it's gonna help us to get used to working with pencil. And I want you all to get used working with your pencils. So in this, we're just controlling the pressure that we're putting up the object, so we can have a smooth surface that is consistent and is not having the same tone. I'm doing this with my 2H if you're wondering which pencil I'm using. And I'm also trying to keep my lines in the direction of the object. That's also gonna help us give the drawing certain three-dimensionality. So I'm gonna change now to my HB. So yeah, these two sides are part of the shadow side, but then we're gonna see that this side is actually a mid-tone. And this side is gonna be darker. And that's also something that's gonna help our drawing to have more three-dimensionality. Light and shadow is very, very important no matter what you're drawing. Because sometimes if you don't use this properly, then you're gonna have a drawing that looks very flat. In the previous class, I mentioned that I wanted you to work on your sketches, and that I only wanted you to work on the outline of the object on our animal. So it would be literally something like this. This is what we're gonna work on later. But we just have to understand it first. Because if we don't understand how the light is hitting our object, then our object can look either too flat, or it can look with shapes and sizes that we don't want it to look. So if you have an object and you do a shadow that's too pronounced, maybe you're going for a depth that you were not intending to do. And what's really nice about understanding how light and shadow works is that it's gonna be working like that in every object. Like it doesn't matter what you're drawing, it doesn't matter if you're drawing an animal, if you're drawing a landscape. If you're drawing something out of memory, then even if it's out of memory, it's still light is gonna be predictable and is gonna behave the same way. You're gonna see that the light also goes with the shape of the objects. And that's what I'm doing my shadow in straight lines because that's the form of my figure right here. And you're gonna see how doing this you can also help the volume of your object. You can also tell the spectator what's happening with your object. Just like if I have my hand here, I'm also having like the light coming from up, and I have like this part in light and this part in shadow. And I also have this shadow going in this way. This is just because of the shape of my hand. This is just where a tendon is passing by and then is casting that shadow. And then we have a little reflection here. But all this is just part of the shape. If I was drawing this and I go ahead and do a shadow here in the middle of my hand, then it's already not gonna be understandable what's happening with my hand and what's the shape of my hand. So that's why it's so important to actually understand the volume and to actually understand how the object is gonna respond to this light. Maybe you think that this takes a lot of time, but believe me, I'm doing this faster than I would. If you can see, the texture on this side is not as smooth as the one up, so that's something we could also work on. And how do we create that? Just passing again and making those points where we leave it maybe too light, we darken it a little bit. So you see that this is just a little bit darker than this side, and that's because we're doing the mid-tone. And then when we go ahead and do it fully on the shadow side, then it's gonna be way darker. So I'm just gonna use a darker pencil. I have a 2B. That's what we're gonna be working with. Again, just going with the shape of the figure that we're doing. Don't worry about losing our indicators because they're going to be outside of the drawing. So they're all good. And then you already see the difference that we have between the mid-tone and between the darker tone. And this works when we think that we only have one light source. That's the one we place on top of here. Because if we would have another source of light, then the sides of this cube would not be solid, but could have a bit of a gradient. So that's what's important to understand here. And then we have what we wanted to have on the cube. We have a light side, and then we have our shadow sides that are composed by the midtone and by the shadow side. Then we go ahead to the cast shadow. So yeah, as I mentioned, the cast shadow is the one that is going to be projected because of the object. And the shadow is also going to have the form of the object. What is very important about a cast shadow? That the shadow is always going to be more dark when the object is hitting the ground. So then in this line here, and in this line here, those 2 points are gonna be the ones where the shadow is hitting most. And you can see it like on the day with any object. If I go ahead and put the pencil here, then you're gonna see that this part of the shadow, this is the cast shadow of the pencil, this part of the shadow is gonna be darker and is gonna increasingly go lighter. And that's what we wanna show on our drawing as well. So we're gonna start darker, and from there we're gonna increasingly go softer. And I started with a pencil that is a bit darker, but in the middle I'm gonna change to another pencil. So yeah, on the side we also see the gradient. We're also gonna see how the shadow is gonna be is gonna go from its darker to its lighter. And this cast shadow is very important because also sometimes we draw things that are kind of floating in space. And when we go ahead and put a cast shadow on them, then we already place them somewhere, then you already see the ground, then you are gonna understand that they're not just floating. Okay, this is me using this pencil to the softest, working with the pressure. And I'm gonna use another pencil to soften that. I do have to admit that at this point is a challenge not to go out of the line. But you know, we can always erase it when we're done. Don't worry too much about it. Worry most about the pressure on your pencil, so this can go as smoothly as we can. So yeah, this is how the cast shadow works in here. You just gotta remember that once it hits the ground, it's gonna be very strong. And when it stops touching it, then it's gonna when it stops touching it, then it's gonna be lighter. Okay, I think there's a little issue here, and I'm just gonna allow myself to correct that. Mm. Yeah, no, the light here. We needed to do this point together with this one, so then most of the shadow we're having on this side. And then we can jump ahead and do our sphere, and to understand what's happening with the shadow that's gonna be hitting the sphere. So just as we're working with the square, it's pretty much the same. We just have to think that if light is gonna hit straight on the object, then our cast shadow is gonna be on a sphere as well. Or not an sphere but an ellipse. And in this we can see, and we're gonna be able to see how the form is also gonna be affecting. So all these, the light side, the shadow side, and midtones, we're gonna see not on this flat surface, but it has to go in the gradient so we understand that it's a sphere and that it's not just a circle on the space. So we can start with the indication of the division from our light side to our dark side. And then we want to have very present where the most amount of light is hitting the object, because that's gonna bring our drawing to life. And we, in this case of the sphere, we also want to think. So I was telling you that this drawing is thinking that we only have one source of light, and we're also thinking that this, because of only having one source of light, the surface where it's placed is not reflecting any light. But on this we're gonna think of reflection light. And reflection light is just that: when you have an object placed on a surface, the surface can sometimes have reflect some of that light. So the light that is coming from here is reflecting on this surface and hitting the object again. This is something that we're gonna be seeing a lot when we're doing our illustrations. So it's very important when you're drawing an animal that is in, it's in nature. There's a lot of different colors that can be reflecting on the animal. Let's say if it's just sitting on a tree, then the green of the leaves can be reflecting on it, or even the blue of the sky can be reflecting on it. And you're gonna see when we're working on this that that reflection light is gonna give a lot of volume to our figure. So we're gonna start with our lightest parts. I was using a 2H for that. And then we're going from there. And I want to be careful with my lightest tones here. I also want to be careful with the shape and doing these lines, because as I mentioned, that's gonna give a lot of three-dimensionality to our object. So then just gradually you're gonna start darkening it more and more. And if you go up, you also do it softer. From there you start going darker. Alright, we're back and apologize for that. Looks like today is just full of technical issues. And again, this is just an exercise of getting used with handling your pencils and playing with the pressure that you're putting on your pencil. And maybe right now it looks like the difference between these are very set, but we can smooth that later, so don't worry about it. Just remember that we can go way darker in these parts. And yeah, it's a sphere, so it's also gonna have shapes like this. We can also follow those. So these also help us with the shape, and the ones that go this way are gonna be telling us all the information about the lighting. I'm also doing it this way because it was easier with the angle that I have my pencil to do the strokes like this than like this. But yeah, that's also your decision what is easier for you, and you also have to find what's easier for you. You don't have to overcomplicate things. We can also do this by layers. Like if you see here, I'm not necessarily going super harder, and we know that this is already the part of the object that's gonna start being on the dark side. But you can just do it on layers, do what feels right for you, and don't rush if that helps you understand. In here, like in the whole middle of the sphere, we're gonna have like an imaginary line. This is gonna be our shadow line, and this is just gonna make the things that you're drawing very dramatic. But we want that because this dramatic lighting is gonna help us understand the shape and the form of the figure that we're drawing. And right in the middle, we're gonna have our core shadow. And the core shadow is just gonna be the stronger shadow. The core shadow is gonna be the darkest point between our shadow side. Why is this happening? Because we have this rounded object. Then when we hit this limit of the shadow, when it's going away from it, then it's also gonna catch some light, and is the one that I was telling you about, the reflection light. We also don't want to make it the reflection like too light. We have to remember that even when we have light parts on our shadow side, they are never gonna be lighter than any tone of our light side. So our darkest in here is gonna be the lightest in the shadow part. That's gonna be easier to see later on. But that also can help you not to go too soft. Just try to compare it. Like, yeah, of course, if I compare it now, I have maybe Jupiter here. But then if I start going darker, you're gonna see how this three-dimensionality then is gonna pop up. And it's just also working on the gradient. Like the exercises we were doing the first couple of classes where we didn't want to have a line that is really like dividing our drawing, but we wanted slowly getting to that point. And in here is when I tell you that if we draw following the shape of our object, that's gonna give it also three-dimensionality. So in here I'm not really following the shading, the lighting, how it's hitting the object, but I'm just following the shape. That's also gonna help us. Then it's slowly getting there. Yeah, I can tell you that we can still darken this way more. So let me see. I wanna even this part and then go darker. Okay, so I'm gonna go darker with this. Make sure I do that where my core shadow is, where I have my darkest point of the whole object. Then it just goes a little bit lighter to the edge of the object, but not that much. Like it's not gonna go to that light that we have on our light part. And in here we can already think about the reflection light. You see it here. And this is also what I was telling you about the layers, that we can do a little bit darker and then work from there and then see what works and what we like and what feels right. Okay, if I see this, maybe I feel that I have to go darker here. Like I was kind of losing the shape of the sphere. It went too flat in the end. Which, if this wasn't a sphere, then also can give us a lot of information. Like if that was going like that, then that would tell us that this part of this figure is actually flat and not rounded. But yeah, right now we are doing something rounded. So I'm gonna do a light pencil to kind of blend in these edges. You see how we're already on this side, we don't see that strong line dividing. Okay, maybe here, but let me smooth that in. Yeah. And then we can also do it on this side. And yeah, this is gonna be always gonna be a process that is gonna take time. 'Cause we really wanna get it right, you know. Then you understand how important it is, the lighting. And in here, I'm just gonna go to the highlight, doing a very soft transition. Yes, something like this. Even at this point, I think we can go dark, go darker. So let me see what I have here. Hmm. At this point, we also have to be very soft with our transitions. We don't want it to be too obvious, but rather very delicate. Okay, if you let me, I'm gonna keep working on this. Okay, I just wanna erase a bit of here that I think I overdid it. And let me just blend that in. And right now we are only missing our cast shadow. So yeah, we're gonna think of it just as an ellipse in the ground. And it's gonna be something like it's gonna be something like this. And again, we wanna start, or we wanna keep in mind that this cast shadow is gonna be stronger when it's hitting the ground. Like the object and the ground are touching, and that's where we're gonna have our stronger tone. I'm gonna go right ahead and do my softest, so we can work from there, from soft to dark. And then let's work the darkest here. And yes, in the cube you can also see that this cast shadow can be darker than the object itself. Yeah, and you see there's already having a lot of reality on this drawing. Like you can really see the sphere sitting there or the cube sitting there. And maybe the hardest is just to blend these transitions. And then we have it. What do you guys think? Okay, this is what I tell you also about working with a pencil. That is very easy to get your hand dirty with the graphite and then staining the paper. So I wanna think about that when we're doing a final one. If I'm looking at this, I think maybe our reflection light is maybe just maybe is too aggressive. Nothing wrong with it being too aggressive, but I think we can soften it a bit like this. Yeah, yeah, I think that works. We still have a uh, reflection light that we can clearly recognize on the object, and we have the cast shadow where the object is touching the ground. So from here, if we were to name all the parts of our drawing, then we would have our line, and on this side we have light side. On this side, even when it's the light side, we still have midtone. Over here and over here, and in here we have very clearly our highlight. Then we go from there, we have here the core shadow, and we have the form shadow. And then right here we have our cast shadow. And when we're doing our shading in our illustrations, we wanna be thinking about this. We wanna be thinking about, okay, where is my core shadow? Where is my animal having the darkest point? Where is my highlight? Highlight can also give a lot of life to a drawing. If you're gonna see, like, let's say, let's look at the pictures that I have of my, if we're gonna be looking at highlights, look at the eye. That's something that we wanna place on our illustration. And like, look at the highlight that we have on the eyelash on top of the eye. that's also something that it's gonna make a big impact on the illustration. If we're going on the line of the mouth, on the upper line of the mouth, that's also a structure that's catching a lot of light, and it gives us a lot of information because it's telling us that that part of the animal is a little bit flat, and then it goes in a curve inside that is gonna have that core shadow. Do you see that? And then on top, on the line that is following the forehead, that then is going down to the nose, then that's also catching a lot of light, and it tells us everything about how the animal is moving and how the light is hitting the animal. We want to understand all of this before we start drawing our animal. And if we were to do an example with this one, which we can, um, then we also wanna indicate stuff like the form. So let me show you. Let's just move this one away. All that I was saying about drawing with the shape of the animal, of the shape of the object, is something that's gonna make a lot of sense when we are doing our animals. Okay, let me see. If this doesn't work, we have to find another way. So we can think of this animal, we can think it, well, it just evoked me to a landscape, like a surface that's having like hills and it's having valleys. And then in that way it's also catching the light, and the hills are catching light on the edge, and then on the valley then you can see very strongly this shadow. Okay, it's not coming back. Okay, let's just give it a minute. Yes, okay, we are back. And this is what I wanted to show you. So if we have an example like this lizard, and then this is what I'm telling you that I see on it. So I see like, okay, maybe, okay, I did my best. So I see, okay, let's do the down part as well. Oof. Then we're here to identify where our shadows are and where our light side of the animal is. Okay, so I'm just trying to indicate roughly where the structures are. The eye is way to the left. Wait. So I see this one here. This structure is clearly catching a lot of light here. And then what's happening? We're having a cast shadow on the same object. Because in here, light is coming from here. Oh, and I took it too low because apparently it only goes like to the half of this, like this, and then it here it goes out again. Then it's catching light again. Oh no, never mind. Yeah, it's all dark. Then on this line is gonna start catching the light again. And you see that all this part is catching the light. And this part is the one I'm telling you that is catching a lot of light. That makes us feel that this is kind of flat. The mouth is very flat on this edge, I mean. And then we have this shadow under it. So all this part down is on the shadow. And then when we have this part here, this is also what I'm telling you about drawing with the shape of it. Is that if you see this is going like this. And then our shadow is going strongly here in the middle of the head. Then it goes lighter when it goes to the top because then this structure is not casting the shadow anymore. And then up here we have another structure that's catching a lot of light. And these two kind of merge together. And this is also like kind of like this. Like another valley that we have. And this together goes like strongly here and goes down again here, like somewhere here, and then it merge here. So yeah, we have like these structures that go around the face that are just way higher than the rest of the structures, and then they start catching a lot of light. And I know, of course, that the parts like this part is not that they don't have anything like, but it's not necessarily shadow. Maybe the tones that we can see there is more giving us information about the texture of the animal, you know. When we have the eye, we also see that very clearly, that on the upper part of the eye is catching more light. And it has like a highlight on the left of the eye, so we can make that more dramatic. So yeah, the eye looks more alive. And then we can also indicate that structure here, that it goes very deep. It's like goes inside of the animal. And then I also see here that the lower part of the eye then is not catching a lot of light. We can indicate the light down here. And the light on the upper one is catching kind of like an edge that goes here, but it's not completely. So we can draw a little bit of shadow on top and also on the other side. And then also on the same structure there is a little bit of shading. And I know that at the beginning when we're doing this exercise is not gonna be looking super beautiful. This is an exercise that you can do also with your animals, and it's gonna help you understand just the structure of it, you know. Maybe when I see this picture first time of this animal, I'm not immediately thinking, oh yeah, this animal has all these shapes on its head. And when we just go with the form, then it gives us already so much information than the one we had before. And then when you do this, you can start discovering new things. Like I just realized we have another shadow here under the eye, and we have another point that is catching light. And then this shadow that goes to the eye can now transition here. Like, yeah, maybe the strongest is just up here, but then it transitions down to a softer tone. Then also around it, and even here in the middle a bit. Okay, my sketch was not super accurate, so I can see that this structure should have been a little bit lower to be matching the eye, but we're going from there. This is just to understand the shape. We don't want it to be exactly the same. I mean, if you want to do it exactly the same, you can totally do that. But I'm just trying to tell you that I'm trying not to worry about that right now. Things like the shape and the proportions on all that we're working on our sketch that I hope you're all working on. And yeah, also things like this line goes lower. Also, what I want you to understand with this is that when we're doing an illustration, we're not going for the texture first. And this is an animal that has a lot of texture, that has a lot of scales, and I'm gonna think about that very, very late on the process. So when you identify a place on your animal that is catching a lot of light, you can be like, okay, that's gonna be my white. But then you have to make everything else a little bit grayish, even when it's not super dark. Like the tone that I have here works perfectly. And then if we go just with the form, then it's gonna work even better. And then we're okay. I wanna erase a bit here. So yeah, and you can play with your transitions from the darker to the softest. But you already understand what's happening. Then later on we can go ahead and do the details. We don't have to start with the details. So why are details less important in this part of the process? So we want to start with a good form of the animal that we're drawing. We want to start with good proportions. We want to start with good shape. And then from there, we want to go to good shading, because the shading is giving us all the information about the volume. If we were to start, let's say I do my sketch, the one we were doing on the last class. If I do that, and then I start working on my details there, then I miss out this this volume part. And that's what is gonna make your, if you just miss that step, then that's gonna make your illustration look a bit flat. Also, if I focus too much on the detail in this point, maybe I'm gonna lose things later on the process. Like, look at this part here on the eye, and you see a lot of scales on this part, no? If I start drawing those scales like one by one, and then I'm gonna darken it because I know that this is darker, then I'm gonna completely lose all those details. And that's why we're not doing it at this point. At this point, I just want to make sure that the overall shape of my animal is correct, and that's it. Then we're gonna work on the shading. That's why I ask you to do a sketch of your animal only with the outline. And I bet you can also see it in this one that I'm drawing. That with little, very little things that we're doing on it, we have a lot of information already about the texture. Okay, not the texture, but about how it is, like the shape of it. Okay, I'm sorry about this part. I was just trying to make it quick. I think it kind of goes together here like that, no? So this is gonna be easier once we have our sketch with the outlines. And then we just have to place all these parts of our animal that are gonna be catching the light, or that are not gonna be catching the light. Then we just have to think of the ones that we were just doing. So we're gonna be thinking of the core shadow. We're gonna be thinking of our midtones, of our highlights. Like in here we can recognize it, like I have a highlight here. I have a core shadow here. And I'm having my midtones here. And here even. Do you see that? Sorry, this line was too strong. I know that I tell you like don't mind about the details, and then I go ahead and correct the detail. That's just me. I know you can do better. You can just focus on your overall. And then we can always go deeper than this. Then when we have our highlights, we understand that is also some three-dimensionality to this. So if the light is coming from the upper part, then the downer part is not going to be catching all the light. So then we can darken that. And then when we do that, we're making the highlight even stronger. For sure. Also in this part here, we can do that. Like down is a bit darker and up is a bit darker. You see that how it's coming to place, how you can see more and more how it goes. And then I was gonna tell you can start working on the details, but no. I think we can still work on some shading. Like in this part, I did just like a flat tone. If we look deeper into it, we see that there's more tones on it. Same thing with the down part here. We have a light part in our shadow, and then we have a darker part. Okay, again, maybe this is not excellent proportions. You saw me draw this in 5 seconds, so I ask you to don't judge my drawing. I'm doing it with a lot of love. Okay, and in this point, if you want, then you can go ahead and start working on some details. Mm, let's see. I think I would do some lines because yeah, it has a crazy amount of lines. We don't have to do them all right now, but then some that is gonna give us information. Okay, and then this big one over here. No, and even doing this, I realized like, oh, maybe I could have done this shadow a bit more. Sorry, I'm just thinking on which lines we can do to make this feel more there, without going ahead and doing all the lines. So yeah, maybe these lines that we have on this structure can help us. I'm gonna do this one here. goes like in a way they all merge in the eye line. And then after, when we're actually doing our final illustration, you're gonna see that we don't have to, like if I'm looking to this reference, I don't have to do everything exactly the same on the face. Like again, this picture is just the representation of one individual of this piece. Is not the representation of the whole species. So if we have kind of like an understanding of this structure, then we can try to replicate it without copying it. Now I'm thinking that my whites are too whites. When you're doing an illustration, really like the actual white parts that you're gonna have are really rare. Even if something is on the light, it's most likely gonna have a tone. So that's what I'm thinking now, like maybe this white is too white for my highlight here, you know? Understanding this, understanding how the light is gonna hit your object is just gonna do wonders for your drawing. Like I rather you spending a lot of time working on shading it than working on the details, on the individual details. Okay, now I'm talking about the details. I do like details. It's just that we cannot jump into the details if we haven't figured out the volume. We haven't figured out the shape. So we'll get there. We're also gonna be talking about texture in our animals. We're gonna be talking about, yeah, different types of skins or different types of furs that we can have. And yeah, that's also important. But right now, I just want you to focus on understanding the light. Do you see? And yes, of course, I see that we don't have all the details of the scales, and we don't have all the details of this shininess that the skin has. but we can work on that later. So right now, I just want you to do these lighting studies with your animal. This is just very important when you look at your animal from different perspectives and you look at it in, yeah, you look at different individuals, you're looking at different pictures. They're gonna tell you a lot of information that maybe you were not thinking of like before, you know? Okay. So yeah, this was today's class. I I hope you learn a lot about how lighting can affect an object and how this can give us a lot of information. I would like to do an exercise next class that's gonna involve a little bit of Play-Doh if you have maybe Play-Doh laying around. And if you wanna jump in this exercise with me, that would be wonderful because it's gonna be an exercise that's also gonna help us understand lighting and also understand lighting when we don't have a reference for the lighting. Like with all the images that I have of my animals, I have very little also that I think I can use. Okay, maybe this I could use to understand it a bit, but with my sketch I already have like a certain pose, a certain shape that is not exactly the one I'm getting from pictures. So then when we're able to do a little sculpture that can help us understand how our animal and how our object is going to be catching the light, then that's amazing. And this is just part of, basically this is just part of doing research before doing our final illustration. I I'm having an issue with the platform, and is that I cannot see your homework. So if you're sending me a homework, I cannot see it at the moment. So I'm gonna ask you if you can send it to my Instagram as as a message. That would be amazing because I really want to see how you've been working this week. I want to see what you've been able to do. And yes, I'm gonna leave here on the chat my Instagram account so you can send me a message with your homework because I know that the app is having some issues with the homework. So I just really ask you to send it to me. I really want to take a look on it and not only the homework that we did this week that was working with these activities of light and shadow and working with these sketches. If you can send me the sketches, I would also really appreciate that. And if you want to send me some of the exercises that we did last week with the leaf and also with the bird, that would be amazing. So I'm gonna send my Instagram account here so you can send me a message. You can just send me a DM with your homework. Okay, that's it. That's the one. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to see the things you've been working on, and I'm looking forward to Saturday where I'm gonna be commenting on those, okay? Thank you so much again, and I apologize again for all the technical issues that we were having today, but I really appreciate you taking the time every Tuesday and Thursday to sit down here with me and just be a part of this class. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.